we are live on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Excited for today. So let me just, we're waiting for the live stream to give me the link. And then there we go. I can hand that off to our good friends on Discord. Boom, there we go. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Kent C. Dodds, and I am excited to talk about whatever you need. So this is Office Hours, where you can share your screen with me. We can chat about life and code and whatever. And I'm just here to help answer questions that you've got. So that is that. It looks like it's going to be a busy one. A bunch of people here already. And we've got a bunch of questions in here. So it's going to be a good time. Let me just see where our line is. Yeah, I think I answered that one last time. Yeah, so we're right here at 72, but I always give priority to folks who are actually in the Zoom call. So who would like to go first?
It's actually me who posted this 72. So
oh, you're 72? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Then I'll just read through this one and you can fill me in if I have questions. So question about the Dialogues API in general. I did read this earlier. Are you talking about like the Dialog API built into the browser?
Not necessarily. Like in general, like if I look into any like UI library, I see that they control the dialog if it's visually on the screen or not by passing a prompt like is open, show, or whatever they call it. And I was wondering why they decide usually to do that instead of having it as a conditional render. So is there like an advantage to do that? Like the only thing that I can think about in this scenario is like animation, but in case there like even libraries that don't have animation in their dialogues, they still use the flag instead of conditional render. So is there a reason for that?
And when you say conditional rendering, you just mean like why accept a prop if I can just not render you?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I see. So I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever. No, I've built a modal before, like from scratch, but most of the time I just use libraries. And my library of choice, in case anybody's interested, is Reach UI. They have a what is it? Not alert dialogue, is it? Yeah, I think maybe it is. No, I think that's a different kind. Yeah, just a regular dialogue. So I like this one a lot. They handle all accessibility and everything for me. And they do have an is open, but I don't think that is a required prop. I think, yeah, so I think it can be managed by itself and you can just decide whether or not to render it. Yeah, but I think it just makes it easier for you to, well, it's called a controlled prop. Let me find, I've got a blog post about this.
I'm asking this because usually if you have like a form inside your dialog, you would have, for example, if you close it and open it, you would have your last state from your last time in the next time you open the dialog. So if you have a condition render, you wouldn't counter that. So usually maybe we need to reset all the states on close, which is also kind of painful. So that's why I'm asking.
Sure. So actually the easy way to do that is using the key prop, which interestingly is just right here. So I'll post this here. And what you can do if you want to reset the state of a component, but not conditionally render it, you can just change the key that you pass and that will unmount the old one and mount a new one and everything is reset. So you could use that for that use case. And then we have, this is my blog post about control props that might be useful to you. And then, that's probably everything. But as far as like the advantage, I think it just, it allows you to, well, for one, it allows you to persist the state that's in there, and that can be desirable in some cases. And then for the other, it means that the component can have built-in animations and stuff like that too. Whereas if you just do conditionally rendering, then you have to manage all of that yourself. So I think those are probably the main things. I'm kind of curious now, actually. Let's see, just looking at the source for this dialogue. There is open. So they've got, yeah, so they do special stuff for tooltips and stuff too, which is interesting, based on whether it's currently open. And then ultimately they do their own conditionally rendering of a portal, which is how, like, underneath the hood for this portal component here, I should probably bump that up. It is using a React Create portal sort of thing. So yeah, it looks like it is actually important for them to know when this is going to be set to open and when it's not. They might be able to do this just with a regular use effect, but yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time since I've built my own dialogue. I don't know if I've ever built my own with React. It would have been really early days if I had, because I just use this one now. So cool. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. I see, Benjamin, you're in here and you have a question in here. So I'll just go to yours next, if that sounds good.
Sounds good, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you're asking about whether there's a reason to use Axios or whether it wouldn't work in the BlueStack. Translated the Axios request to equivalent fetch. It works flawlessly with fetch. It doesn't with Axios. Nothing happens till I kill the request. Adding a time at 1,000 will throw a time at error. So nothing off the top of my mind why Axios wouldn't work with the BlueStack. My first thought here is, why would you use Axios? Like, it seems like an extra library that's unnecessary. You can explain that to me here in a second, but let me take a look at if I can figure out why it's not working. Or actually, yeah, why don't you tell me what is the motivation to bring in Axios?
Well, I was just using Axios because it's simplifying some things, but indeed I don't mind to use fetch, but I'm using third-party library like Molly, which is the equivalent in Europe for Stripe, and also SendGrid, I believe, is based on Axios, and it seems that these libraries are impacted as well, and so.
So it's important that it works.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so I'll just mention, I don't know if you've seen this post yet or not, but for anybody else, I actually do have a blog post about Axios and why you probably don't need it. So
okay,
I will share it here.
Look, yeah.
But the fact that it doesn't work is not good. And so you're saying that it just it times out. It just never completes. So it's been a while since I've used Axios. So let me take a look and see if I can tell.
Yeah, maybe a small detail indeed at the end. Well, what I've done is in the past I was using Remix, and I'm using Fly.io to deploy. And when the BlueStacks arrived, I decided recently to migrate to the BlueStack. And so I just did copy paste of my files, fix some import statement, but everything is working fine. And that's why I'm asking you, because I'm wondering maybe something has changed, and that because on the old project is working, Axios is working as expected. So perhaps I missed something, but perhaps yeah,
you know what? I think I know what could be going on. In the BlueStack, we have a handy little mux. Oh wait, no, this is not the BlueStack. Yeah, so we have this mux directory, and when you start your server, it starts this file, which will run the start script, which starts up an MSW server. And until recently, this bypass would actually be error and or warn, I think is what it was. And so actually, first, let me make sure I'm making the right assumption. You're using Axios on the server or on the client?
On the server, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So your request is going to get intercepted by MSW unless you change something with the BlueStack. And so that's so that you can work completely offline. Your end-to-end tests can work offline, all of that.
Yeah, okay.
And you can have mocks for stuff. And so there are a couple options here. First, I would go into here in your start TS. Well, first of all, I think it should let your request go through and it'll just log a warning to you if it says warn. But maybe MSW is messing, like it isn't playing nice with Axios somehow. I don't think that should be the case because I have used MSW with Axios before, but that could be potentially. I think MSW like 3 months ago made a pretty significant change to its node interceptor. And I haven't used Axios with MSW since then. So maybe there's a bug there. So here are a couple of things that I would suggest. First of all, change this on unhandled request to bypass if the error messages are annoying you. Secondly, you can just comment out server.listen. And now from there, there won't be any interception. And then if you want to completely get rid of it, then what you'll do is you'll go into the package JSON and anywhere you can find mocks, you can remove the -- require mocks so that it doesn't actually require that file so that you don't get any interception. I would try that first and see if that makes Axios work. And then you just know that there's a problem with MSW and Axios playing nice.
Yeah, apparently that will be the issue because I'm seeing now that it's working.
Oh, good news. Okay,
yeah. So
if you
I just commented the server listen. So what is the impact? Because I never used MSW before, but I would like to. But what's the purpose of this line 5?
Yeah. So it is for API mocking. And so and there are a bunch of use cases for this. I like to use it for mocking all third-party dependencies for a couple of reasons. One, if you have like contributors to your code base and they need to have like API keys for, what like on my project here, on my site, I've got a .env example that has, I've got Sentry, I've got Mailgun, GitHub, Tito, Reddit. Well, yeah, that's not, but Transistor, a bunch of Discord stuff, ConvertKit, Simplecast, Twitter, and Verify, like so many APIs. And I don't want to, I want people to be able to contribute to my site without me having to give them all of those actual tokens. And so every one of these APIs is mocked out in my mocks directory. So I've got, not that. So I've got Twitter and Transistor and Simplecast and GitHub, all that stuff. And so it's all mocked out. So it makes it easier for contributors. It also makes it easier for me when I'm developing a feature, because some of these APIs are either really slow, and so I put caching in front of them. But if I want to hit them a lot as I'm testing, like building that out, then yeah, my mock is faster, and it's some of them are rate limited as well. And so having a mock in front of it means that I don't get rate limited. And then the other, actually another really cool thing is because my content is managed or is hosted on GitHub, I'm using the GitHub API to interact with that. But like as I'm writing a blog post, that new blog post isn't on GitHub yet. And so I need to say, hey, app, when you're going to GitHub to go get this blog post, instead of actually going to GitHub, because it's not there, it's actually local, I just redirect it to the local version. So my GitHub mock is actually really cool because it just loads all, it simulates the same GitHub API for my local content, which is really sick. And so then another thing is I go up in the mountains sometimes where I don't have any service. And so being able to still develop my app, that works. So that's MSW. Yeah, and then I guess the last thing, and the original reason for MSW being created in the first place was for testing. Well,
Yes.
actually, no, the original reason was for local development, but and like if an API wasn't ready or whatever. But I started using it heavily for testing because I want to be able to run all of my tests completely offline. That's important to me. So
okay. So if I understand correctly, when I'm running npm run dev, everything like every Axios call will be handled by the MSW, and it will never go outside unless I comment this section. That's correct.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that it actually should go through if you don't
Okay.
have a handler for it. So the bit that says set up server, here you pass what are called your handlers. And so this is like, it's almost like an express like routing API sort of thing. And so you specify your routes that you handle for the different API calls that are made. And if an API call comes in that isn't handled, then the or MSW will behave differently based on your unhandled request. So you can set that to an error, you can set it to a warning, and I'm pretty sure it will go through if you set that to a warning. You can set it to bypass, and so it will go through just without a warning. And so I'm pretty sure yours was set to warn. If I'm
It was set to
not
bypass.
mistaken. Oh, it was bypass. Yeah. So because of that, it should go through. And the fact that it's not working to me says that Axios has Axios and MSW don't play nicely together.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
And so if you want to use it, what I would suggest is making a minimal reproduction that shows Axios and MSW. Like, don't bring in remix or anything. It's just Axios and MSW. So show that they're not working together, and open an issue, and then start digging.
I will. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck.
Thanks.
MSW is amazing. I love it. The only thing for me that doesn't work when I go up in the mountains to work is my images, because I haven't figured out a good way to mock those ones. I know that I could, I just haven't taken the time because all my images come from Cloudinary. And so I just have a bunch of like images that don't work, but it's fine because I can do everything else without those.
Great.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Great. I'm glad we came to some sort of next steps, at least for that. Anybody else? I see Shikar, you're in here, so I'll take a look at what you've got. You mentioned that you would make a runnable link so I can run it myself. Yeah, okay.
Yep, I've pasted that in the chat.
Oh, okay, there it is. Cool.
Actually, it's a Replit link, so I guess you'll have to log in. It doesn't work on Code Sandbox tests. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, and Replit, you should have sent me where I was wanting to go. Okay, where's chat?
Okay, why does it show it to you like that?
I don't know. Let's make it big. Oh my goodness.
It actually looks really nice on my
Yeah,
side.
maybe if I fork it. There we go.
Yeah.
Node v12. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
I guess
So
human test and it should work.
okay, so we got React scripts. We look at source test here. Okay, so this is the assertion that fails. And what I suggested, I've just got to bring myself back up to speed. I said, yeah, so get the promise from the click, then assert on the loading, and then wait for the click. And then I said, maybe you'll have to wait for the loading text to show up. And then you can wait the click. And what is happening here is we're trying to wait for the loading to show up and it times out. But if we get rid of this, then it will, the test will pass, I'm guessing. So it's just asserting on the loading state and it's not working. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is, man, this is such a pain. I think we kind of talked about this last time, but for the sake of everybody viewing right now, what asynchrony is tricky, especially because you've got, because you're mocking here. Like I said last time, you should just use MSW. I'm pretty sure this problem would go away. But what if you were using ASW? So, oh, hold on a second. Click promise. Did you try this?
Yeah, I tried that. It wasn't working, so.
And that also didn't work?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so what's going on here is, yeah, no breaks. Let's run it again with that. So you click on this thing, and built into user event is some delay, because users, that's just the way that these events work, is there's a delay between some of these events. And so by the time the click event is done, you've already resolved the promise for the mock. And so it's already re-rendered before you even get to the next line of checking for the loading state. And so that's kind of why I was thinking that this would work, because then we're not actually waiting for the delay. We instantly say, okay, go ahead and run this click, but also we're going to wait for this to be in the document. And yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised this bit doesn't work. I'm wondering if, this probably won't work, but let's just try it for the fun of it. Let's see, await, whoops, promise.all. And okay, that's annoying. Try again. Kind of don't think that this will work, but maybe that would be interesting. This is effectively an assertion. Yeah, what is going on there? Doesn't like that. Oh, overlapping act calls. Yep, that makes sense, because find by text is going to have an act and user click is going to have an act. Huh. Yeah, okay, well, that's not going to work. Okay, going back. Yeah, so this is probably what should work, but it's not. And the reason is because you start the click, the code that you have right here, I'm guessing it's all running synchronously, because we've got the mock resolve value stuff. I'm going to test that theory a little bit, but in any case, it finishes before we even try to check for the loading state. And so we've already re-rendered by the time we are checking for the loading state. And so that is why this is not working. So I'm pretty confident that if you switch to MSW, which you should anyway, then this would be a non-issue. Do not mock fetch. But yeah, if we tried instead to have this be an async function, and then we say await, or probably just making it an async function is enough. And then we return a JSON, which is an async function that returns mock JSON. Instead of doing this, I think, oh, actually, hold on. Then fetch would be, actually, yeah, mock implementation. What is it called? Mock. And we'll put this in there. Pretty sure that's what it is. Now I can't remember because I always get autocomplete on this.
Yeah, that looks correct.
Okay, so I think that this will force it to be on the next tick of the event loop. Oh, whoops. It's not going to work. Try that again. Boy, it sure takes a long time in this thing.
There is no mock JSON now.
Oh, you're right. What was mock JSON? Oh, was it a mock function? Okay. So we just need this to return fake to-dos. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Okay. And if this doesn't work, then we will await the next tick of the event loop. So we'll just like await, yeah. So let's try await, new, promise, resolve, set timeout, resolve after 1 millisecond. And then we'll do the same thing for this, just to make sure that these all happen on a future tick of the event loop. And I think that this will work. So hopefully this does. Now what will happen is we'll go through the click where we run to the next line. Yeah. So we run to the next line and now testing library is saying, oh, okay, so I'm going to watch the document. I'm going to do like every interval, every now and then, I'm going to check the document and see, can I find loading text? Oh, I can. Great. That's awesome. And then we come in here and we say, okay, let's wait for that click to finish. And because when it's finished, then we can proceed to the next bit that says find all by role. If we await this, I think that actually will also work because now these things are not going to happen immediately. So even with the delay, it might not work. Actually, we'll see. Yeah, it's not going to work because the delay on the user click takes longer than the API call. And so the user clicks, now we're delaying, API finishes, we re-render, now we're done delaying. And so that's why you still need to do the await of the click promise, but that works. And so this is what you're going to have to do. I think that if you switch to MSW, you may still need to do this because MSW is pretty fast as well. But yeah, this is just the trade-off that we make when we're mocking things out is if we're a manual tester and we're going through this, but we have superhuman capabilities and we can run as, or let's say, never mind, not manual, but like if we were to see this in a browser, see this interaction, that loading spinner would show up really fast and then disappear. It just happens so fast. And so that is not what our user is experiencing. They are not seeing like a really fast loading state. And so our test is actually diverging from what the user is actually experiencing a bit here. And so we have to alter our test a little bit if we want to make an assertion on that loading state, we need to alter things a little bit to say, hey, the user's going to click, and sometime between the time that they click and the click is finished, there's going to be a loading state. It could even come after the user's finished clicking. It doesn't really matter. All we know is after the user clicks, there's a loading state for a certain period of time. And we don't want to proceed through the test until that's done. And so what was happening was the click happened or the loading state showed up and disappeared during the time it took to click. So that's why that happened. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. But like in the recent version, was this delay added, or was it not there in the like the previous version of user event? So this delay to user event was added recently, or?
Yes, yeah. In the latest version of user event, they added a delay to every event. It used to be that you had I think it was an option on the user event type. If you specified a delay, then that would be asynchronous. Otherwise, everything would be executed synchronously, which is not how it works. That's like, there are events that happen in sequence, but they don't all happen on the same tick of the event loop. But that's what we were doing in our test. And so the change that was made is correct because it's more accurate to what is actually happening. And so you're going to catch more issues this way. But you do have to, yeah. And this was actually my big issue with bringing user event into testing library as like an official built-in thing, was I didn't feel comfortable with the idea that that people would have to deal with this for loading states. That like you literally ran into the reason I didn't want to build this into testing library, is because loading states were hard to assert on. Some people argued against me and said, well, loading states are kind of an implementation detail anyway. I super disagree with that. Loading states, like you have designs for loading states, like that's absolutely part of your app. And other people would just say, well, it's not that big of a deal. And I mean, that is a little subjective. You ran into it. I'm sure a lot of other people are running into it as well. But yeah, this is just what you have to do. Again, if you don't use if you use MSW instead of this, you don't have to do all this awaiting promise stuff, because MSW forces things to be on the right tick of the event loop. So what you were doing before is changing the behavior of mock the fetches, and that's not your fault. It actually doesn't make sense that mock resolved value would result in this being on the same tick of the event loop. That doesn't make any sense, but apparently it was, evidently. And so, yeah, so my suggestion is to get rid of all this and use MSW instead. And then keep this piece where you say, okay, we're going to click and there's going to be a delay here, but there's also going to be a loading state that shows up. And I wish that there was a better way to model this that made this more obvious that you're going to have to do this, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who are running into the same issue. I'm not sure what to do about it. Like, on the one hand, this is more accurate to what's going on. On the other, it's less obvious that this is how you test loading states. So I don't know what to say, but that's what I'm done talking.
I guess in the solution, we can comment out the line number 20 and it still work. Will it not?
If you comment out line 20.
Yep.
Yeah, that I would expect that to work as well. Yeah, because we're getting the next tick of the event loop here. You could actually do the same by switching those two.
Yeah.
But the point is, we just need to get it on the next tick of the event loop. This is more accurate because in both of the cases, it's like you don't get the response until at least sometime in the future, and then JSON isn't parsed until at least sometime in the future either.
Yep,
So this is more accurate. But again, I strongly advise that you use MSW. Do not mock fetch.
Yeah,
use MSW.
I usually use that in production. This was actually some very old code that I got from somewhere, and I was just looking around that.
Yeah, you can totally use MSW just right here, just in the one test. So it's even if it's older code, you're making changes to it, bring in MSW just for this one test. You can totally do that. You don't have to have like a test-wide MSW thing. So that's an option. But yeah, if you're like, nah, that's I'm not going to bring a whole library just for this one test, then this is what you'll want to do.
Yeah. And one more quick question, like you recently upgraded your Epic React Dev to all use the new user event. Did this not happen to you? Like any of your tests didn't break just by awaiting?
Yeah, there was I think the Bookshelf app, I had to do something. Let me look at my commit that updated upgrade to React 18. So here's what I updated, like all dependencies that I could. We did have to, for fake timers, I had to make this change. That was kind of annoying. I added a note in the instructions about that. Also had to add the awaits here. Yeah, for most of the, yeah, so this is where I'm doing the assertion on the loading state. And because this is a fake timer, this like doesn't suffer from the same problem because it's just it's a fake timer, but then the rest of this is not a fake timer. Like this is, I'm using MSW. So the fake timer delay, all of that stuff happens synchronously because it's fake timers. And so I don't have the same problem right there. And then I think that I didn't have assertions on loading states anywhere else after using user event. And so I didn't run into the same issue. I might have in the testing React apps maybe had the same thing. Whoops. Let's see. I intentionally made all the React 18 upgrade a single commit for all of these, so it's easier to look at this stuff. Let's see, loading. Yeah. So I said wait for element to be removed. Yeah, I guess I didn't have the same problem, but this one is using MSW, so maybe you don't have this problem with MSW. So yeah, here's how you use MSW in a single file. Ta-da. So I don't know. My guess is because I didn't run into this problem is because I'm using MSW. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Are we good?
Yep. That answers my question. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Good luck. I know that's annoying. Yeah, coding can be hard sometimes, and it probably could be better. And I'm sure we'd all welcome improvements, but there we go. Okay, cool. Anybody else in the Zoom call have a question?
I do. Oh, sure. Go.
All right, we've got two, and a
it.
topic comes first in the alphabet. So we're
Yep.
going to go with you.
Do it.
Okay, sure. I already dropped my question in the chat in the KCD Office Hours. So I have an app, and I've already implemented the wrapper on the Axios, and we are using that wrapper everywhere. So what we are trying to achieve is that canceling certain API calls whenever the URL changes. So I'm unable to implement this. The one way is I can cancel the API calls from each component on unmounting. This is one of the approach that I got from the internet. So can you like point me towards something that can, that is a centralized approach that I can implement in the wrapper file, and that's cancel the API for the previous URL, not for the the updated URL.
Okay, let me make sure I understand what's going on. So the user is there, they navigate to one page, you start loading data, and then they say, never mind, I want to go somewhere else. You want to cancel that data.
Yes.
Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, for one, Remix does this automatically.
I have to write my entire
everybody
app.
rewrite their apps to Remix and everything all at once. So just have to, every office hours, I have to shout out to Remix. But yeah, so how do you solve this? I think that
if you guys want, I can show you and share my screen.
I think we can manage without, but maybe we will. I think what I would do is I would have a hook that that accepts a abort controller, or maybe returns an abort controller, and that hook would have a use effect that watches the location URL, and if that URL changes it, or sorry, it would abort that abort controller, the signal or whatever. But then you'd pass that signal to any fetch request that the component makes. And then of course the fetch request would have to handle, it'd have a catch. And if it was an abortion, then it just ignores it or something. That's super annoying that you can't cancel promises, but that's the world we live in. So yeah, that's probably what I would do. And then you just have to put that everywhere that you're doing fetch calls. If that's really annoying to put it everywhere, then you can have some sort of abstraction that collects all the fetch calls that are going on. This would be higher up in your tree, and so you would just like register a fetch call with this thing. Or have like an abstraction that wraps your fetch call. Maybe you already have a hook that does that. In any case, it would, and actually, yeah, if you had a hook that does that, then that hook can be responsible for doing all of this stuff. That would probably be even better. So yeah, just a hook that manages your fetch calls, and it will, it has a use effect that watches the location, and if the location changes, then it cancels the request with the abort controller. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I've tried this approach, but my API I actually wrote this in my main file, the app.js file. So what I did was exporting signal from there and using that signal in my HTTP wrapper, and whenever the href changes, I try to cancel it, but I think for some reason it's not working. I think I have to exchange the entire wrapper logic along with the the already wrapper that I've written and use that hook that you're mentioning. I think that might solve my problem. Right
Yeah.
now,
Or are you exporting a signal from like the module level?
yes.
Yeah. So that you can only use an abort controller once. And so, yeah, you wouldn't want to do that. It needs to be an abort controller per fetch call.
Oh, okay.
I think you might be
got
able to
you.
use the same abort controller for multiple fetch calls. I think that's actually possible, but you can only abort it once. And so if you do it at the module level, then it'll work for the first time the user does that, but the second time it won't. So yeah.
Is there anything in JS that catches even right before your href changes? Is it because I've searched the internet, I didn't find anything? Is there any event on the window level object or something that that happened just right before your location is getting changed? Is there anything?
Yeah, sort of. I think there is like, how sometimes when you close a tab, it'll say, are you sure you want to? Because like you need to save your work or whatever. So there's an event for closing the tab. I don't think there's one for and for navigating away from the site. I don't know if there's one for navigating within the site. And additionally, like you don't have any time to do
Yes.
much work. And that's why it's always like the native dialogue that pops up, because that is a synchronous API. And so it actually freezes all execution of JavaScript and everything for that window. So that's why they do it that way. But yeah, I don't think there's anything like that for navigating within the app.
Okay, all right. So I have one other question. I think you might already answered it on your AMA and maybe on other places, but I still need to ask that question. I feel like I need to know that thing. Actually, I want to, you said you were not expert in JavaScript, and then you learned a lot about JavaScript. You mentioned a lot of stuff from where you did that, but is there anything that that I consider as one-stop shop to learn or become an expert in JS? So if you can point me toward that, it would be a lot easier. I've seen MDN docs, but it's a lot of confusing from where to start. Actually, I have seen your podcast links and also your AMAs here. I've seen that, but I still need to ask this question of hope.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the best, let's go to here. Oh, actually, we've got one there already. The best way to get experience is to have experiences. So I talk about that a little bit in this post. And so for getting really good at JavaScript, you just have to do it a lot. At least that's what I did. I just did a lot. I didn't really read books. At the very beginning, I did read some books. And I don't know if you've seen this talk yet, but it is 0 to 60 in software development. Yeah,
yes,
so
I've
you've seen that one.
The entire. Yeah, I've seen it in the entire.
Yeah. So that I did read some books, but yeah, I don't really read books as much these days. Another useful thing is what am I looking for? I totally blanked on what this was, what I was going to talk about. No, I can't remember. But this one is also useful. So how to solidify what you learn. Man, now I'm going to be bugged about that other thing that I was going to share. It was a blog post. So somewhere in these 190 blog posts.
The standards from ECMA? I've started reading it, but it's too complex.
Yeah, that's probably not the best place to start. So what should happen is your curiosity for a thing should naturally lead you to those deeper things. But you don't just start at the deeper things because you don't have any context of why you should care. You start with something that is more at the level that you're at currently, and you get progressively deeper into that lower level stuff until you do start reading some specs. And I certainly have never read the entire ECMAScript spec before, but I've absolutely dove into it over time. So man, I wish that I could remember what that other article was that I was thinking about. There are a lot of them in here, so I don't think I'll be able to find it. Yeah, so maybe see if we do. Oh, yeah. I was going to show you the 2010s blog post. So this is, I don't know if you've read this already. It's pretty long. That gives, it says it's an hour read. But it goes pretty in depth with like how I got into tech and everything, because the 2010s are when I started. So you can look into that as well, if that's helpful.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Ultimately, it comes down to just spending a lot of time doing it. And so like, don't feel like, oh, I'm not cut out for this because I don't get this or whatever. Like, never feel like that. Just keep chugging away and you will get it over time. So, okay, Renee. And I noticed Abesek, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I noticed you chatted in the Zoom chat. If you could actually put that in Discord, it's easier for me to like share links and stuff like that there, so people have access to it. Everybody who's not in the Zoom. So if you could put that there, I'll get to you next. Hi, Renee.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Doing well. Couple, hopefully really quick ones for you. When you migrated away from emotion to Tailwind only, did you miss anything from the emotion stuff? Like, for example, like the ease of a styled component versus having to write a functional component, like a functional component with a children prop. Like, is that trade-off anything that you ever were like, man, really do miss a simple styled component?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was at PayPal, I actually started making this transition for our component library because I lost the debate of saying, hey, let's just use, at the time it was Glamorous. I was saying, let's just use Glamorous for everything. And then, and so like we were starting to explore taking our design tokens and turning those into Glamorous components and stuff. And I lost that battle because they said, well, we support more than just React. So like, we need to have class names. And I was like, well, boo. And I said, but okay. I'm so glad that I lost that battle because it was way better outcome. But yeah, when I started saying, okay, well, now we got class names, we're going to have to do like a button component with class names and stuff. So at first, I actually created a higher order component that instead of CSS, it would just take class names to make that piece easier. That was so hard to make TypeScript happy for that I gave, actually it was Flow. No, it was TypeScript. It was so hard to make that work that I gave up. And I was like, it's really not that big of a deal. I'll just make a function component. It accepts, props and composes class names and stuff. And so while it is maybe like if you make 30 of these, you're like, man, there's some boilerplate here, there's got to be an abstraction there, you make a higher order component, it doesn't really save you that much.
Okay, that's sort of what I ran into. Was like, I transitioned a full site, I was like, I just want to like get back to the bare bones of it and get rid of emotion and get rid of styled components and all that stuff. And that was the only trade-off, was like, I just had to make like a few more functional components that were basically just little design shells instead of a style.div. Yeah,
it's just like it is definitely a couple more characters to type, but I found that we spend a lot more time reading code than writing it, and so I don't mind if it takes a little bit more time to write it. What matters most to me is how easy is it to change that. And a lot of times I think that we're worried that changing the like if we end up changing the or like having a lot more characters means that it will be harder to change, and that is not at all the case.
True. Okay, cool. Two more maybe like hopefully quick ones for you. When do you ever like, when deciding, oh, I'm going to declare a constant in my component, do I do that at the component level, like inside the functional component, or I'm going to do that at the module level, like with all the imports and stuff? Is there ever a decision tree to make, or is it just like, man, if you can just declare it, do it in the module level and don't even bother putting it in the component level?
Yeah. So there are a couple of trade-offs to weigh here. So first of all, like sometimes it won't even work if you do it at the module level. For example, if you've got a component, it only renders on the client. You've got and so like you know that you have access to window, but the module can run on the server. Then yeah, like you can't do it that way. Or like in some cases, this component can run on both, and so we have to put it in a use effect or something. So like there are some cases where you can't do it at the module level, or at the component level. But like outside of those, which are not very often, but like it does happen. Other things to consider are okay. So I've got a blog post that is what is it called? No, that's not what it is. Nest something. Why avoid nesting closures? And this applies to what we were talking about a little bit, but that doesn't completely answer the question. So like the basic idea is you want to keep your functions as simple as possible, and so you only put the stuff inside of it that needs to be inside of it. And so that's why I take, like, if I've got a function and inside of that I've got another function, then I try to take that inner function and move it to the module level, because that inner function, if you move it to the module level, you know it doesn't have access to any of the other functions variables, which simplifies that function. You're like, oh, well, it reduces the amount of things that it can touch, which I think is a benefit. With variables,
explicitly pass in what you want it to have.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That not always is the best thing. Like, of course, I've got in my JSX, I'm mapping over a list or something. I'm not going to extract that. That'd be garbage, But like that's just a thing that I'm thinking about sometimes when I'm talking about that. Is one of the problems with doing that is that now you're separating, like you're putting some distance between the function and where it's being used. And that's the same thing with a variable. You're putting some distance between the variable and where it's being used. And so like as changes come to the code base, people are like, oh, I need to put this function somewhere. I guess I'll just stick it here. And now that distance grows and can be like, just, it's not like really bad, but like it's not great. And so if the variable that you're declaring is like a constant that is never changing, I just feel better about putting those up toward the imports, even if it's far away from where it's being used. Like it just like, it's a weird thing. It doesn't make any sense, but I feel better about that. There is no performance implication, at least in any measurable way, to just declaring it inside the function. In fact, I bet that most browser or JavaScript runtimes will see that and be like, oh, well, you're never changing this or whatever. I'll just like, move this and we don't need to worry about redeclaring it every time. I bet they do that. Like they do amazing stuff. So I'd be really surprised if you could measure that sort of problem. So for constants, you can put it wherever it feels good. For variables that are mutable or like changeable, I absolutely would put it in the component. So I'm guessing you're mostly talking about like constants.
For the most part, it's sort of like my thought process is usually the same as like, oh, if this is just like const name equals quote Jack quote, and it's like, yep, that is like never going to change. I'll just do what you said, like put it as far up as I can. It's more like, oh, what if it's like calling an API or like a new, like today, like today equals new date. It's like, well, that could change over time, but I'm not changing it. So I'm like, oh, part of me says, oh, it's a constant that doesn't change, sort of. So put it up top, but I'm more inclined to put it in the function because it's not like a, hard constant that's like this string will never change sort of thing.
Yeah. Maybe date is a poor example because that can change based on when it's called, but yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if you're calling a function to like get the initial config or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I pretty much just do whatever feels the least terrible.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then last one is love my Vessies that I got on your recommendation for
Wait, sorry, you're
the
what?
Vessies. The Vessi.
Oh
the
yeah,
sneakers.
your shoes.
Yeah, love them.
Yeah, these things.
So great. This is such a weird question. Do you experience the shoelaces coming untied more than regular shoelaces because they're not fabric? They're kind of like
I don't.
different. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
So
that's it.
They're not fabric for you? Are these
such a weird?
Are these like
such
synthetic?
a weird question? Yeah, they're not that sort of like
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
natural
They are a
fiber
little
feeling.
different, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah. So like I double knot them.
Okay.
For sure.
Sweet.
Yeah,
maybe I'll just start double knotting.
Yeah,
Cool.
but
That was
like
really
you never
it.
have to untie them.
Yeah.
I kind of
man.
like sometimes I feel like an old man. Like I don't even tie my shoes. But
Totally.
I haven't actually tied my shoes like in forever. High school, college, I always just slipped them on anyway. I didn't want to bother with tying and untying them. So
yeah,
this just like was me embracing the fact that I never tie and untie my shoes.
yeah, that's awesome. I'll give that a shot. Just like use a shoehorn to get in.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
Totally.
I love these things, man. Yeah. You know what? It occurred to me. So my ankle has been hurting ever since the car accident 3 months ago. And because the dashboard was squeezing down on both of my feet for like 40 minutes after the car accident. And it occurred to me that I think when I finally did come out, they were having trouble like getting the dashboard off. And so I said, I think I can slip my feet out. Like they got the door off and stuff. So I had a little more wiggle room and I was able to slip my feet right out of the shoes. But I'm pretty sure that I could have slipped my feet out right from the start if I had just tried a little bit. But I didn't want to lose my shoes. That is why I sat there for 40 minutes waiting for them to cut me out because I didn't want to lose my shoes. And I ended up losing them anyway. Well, I lost them. And then I went back to the junkyard where they took the car and I found them there. But then they had like something had ripped a little tiny little hole in the sole right where where the balls of my right foot are. And so if I walk in them, I get a blister. So they got ruined anyway. So if I just slipped my feet out right at the start, I'd be playing soccer right now. Pretty sure. So anyway, that's how much I love those shoes.
Yeah.
So stupid. There's always those what ifs of when things like that happen. Anyway, is that all the questions you had, Renee?
Yeah, I'll let you get to others.
Okay.
Okay, Abhishek.
Hi. Yeah, you're cutting out really bad, but I'm guessing you're the same Abesek.
Yeah.
Is that
Yes.
Can
We
you pronounce your
connected.
name for me?
Abhishek. It is Abhishek.
Abesek.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So let's take a look at this. So you're facing issues upgrading from 17 to 18. Previously, it was React 16. Oh, you upgraded to 17. Your intent was to upgrade to 18. Enzyme. Oh, that's why. Yeah. So enzyme for React 18. We use. Okay. I'm confused about this bit because you said you used Jest and React
We
testing
use-
library.
Previously, we were using Engine. Some part is still Engine. Some parts we have upgraded to React testing library. And there are
Gotcha.
some parts which are using this React test re-renderer. Sorry, React test renderer.
Yeah. Okay. So enzyme does not work with React 18. That's why you're having problems. So upgrade. You have a choice. You can either delete all of your enzyme tests, just get rid of them all, and then you can upgrade to React 18, or wait until you've migrated all your enzyme tests to React testing library and then upgrade to React 18. And then in addition to that, the latest version of React testing library only works with React 18. So you have to be on one version back while you wait to upgrade to React 18.
Okay. And I'm getting this error as well for a React text renderer. This error that is cannot read property current of undefined.
Yeah, I've actually seen that as well. When I was doing something, I can't remember what I was doing. But yeah, that's because the incompatibility of is this with Enzyme? No, that's React Testing Renderer. I don't use React Test Renderer. I think I ran into this with React Hooks testing library when I was doing some stuff in there, and they do use React Test Renderer. I don't know. Just use React Testing Library. Don't use Test Renderer or Enzyme, and these problems go away.
Sure, we are trying to upgrade that.
Yeah, so I would say that you're in a position where you either need to delete all the tests that don't work when you upgrade to React 18, or make the tests, move the tests over to React Testing Library first, and then upgrade to React 18. Those are your options.
Okay.
Yeah. Good luck. Good. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. I think that's everything in Discord, or maybe it's not. I should wait before no, actually it is. Yep, that's everything in Discord. Anybody else in Zoom have a question? Okay, we're set.
I have a question, Ken.
Nick. Hey, Nick. How you doing?
Yeah, it's more of actually just like maybe confirmation that I'm on the right path with this project that I'm working on. Can I share my screen? Is that okay? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's 1 second. Yeah, like I guess here, actually it might be easier rather than me trying to explain it. Can you see this?
Yep.
So essentially, like there's this kind of tree view on the right, or on the left, I mean, and you can like drag stuff over and create new tabs. And then you can resize these tabs and stuff as well.
Fancy.
So I had asked Ryan, and he had said that if he was building something like this, like it wouldn't really be server-side rendered, so it would just be like a client-side thing. So what I changed is like this route here, it loads like basically just the project data, which is like the name and yeah, that's essentially it, like the ID and the name. And I made that like I added the dot client to the path, because I think that what that does is it just kind of takes away server-side rendering, right? And makes it client side. So then like everything in this route here would just be like basically almost like just like a normal app that like we used to build in React. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, I don't think is that working?
I think so. Like, yeah, I mean, like, it's like the issue that I guess I was kind of running into is like originally with this tree view, I set it up so that like every time you kind of clicked one of these, it was a button, and it would fire off a request to the server to kind of re-render this tree view. And then I was like, well, is that too inefficient to be doing it that way? So I changed it and put like a context around this and was managing it all in there, because I wanted this to obviously, like if you refresh, oops, oh no, it's not working. Well, anyways, like if you refresh, like I wanted it to like maintain the state, right? So I thought that if it was all like in a context, then it would be easier to kind of persist that up as like a JSON object, and then the next time that it re-renders, it could just grab that out of the database and persist that.
Gotcha.
So I guess like I'm not sure like the kind of best way to architect this. And I was curious if you had any suggestions or could point me in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm surprised that the dot client thing worked. So I guess that's good that it does. The reason that I'm surprised is because when you do a dot client, there are two builds that happen in a Remix app. You have the server build and you have the client build. And if you do a dot server, any module that so let's say you've got a dot server file, now you're doing the client build. It's gonna resolve a bunch of dependencies, and it's gonna find, oh, there's a dot server dependency I'm going to, instead of having that actual module, I'm going to make an imaginary module that just exports nothing. And so like you don't get anything in the server build. Same for the client. So you're building for the client, your exports will just be nothing. And so that's why I'm surprised it actually worked, because I would expect that the loader wouldn't work and the action. But maybe we've done something special to make that work.
Can you see this?
Yeah, I can see.
So that's essentially what I did, was like, this is the route, the project route.
Oh, sorry. I can see the page with your desktop.
Oh, sorry. With my desktop? With the Zoom?
Yeah, and Zoom. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I shared the wrong screen. Can you see the
good.
VS Code now?
Okay, yeah. So you've got a client only. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
So
so it's not your route. It's the component that has the dot client. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That I'm not crazy. Yeah. Okay. So cool. So yeah, what you're going, that piece of it makes sense. So as far as like persisting the left nav, my question is, where does that need to be persisted for refreshes? Like, do users need to, well, okay, so what I'm getting to is you could probably just put that in local storage.
Well, so I a couple of weeks ago, I had it in local storage, but then I was running into issues like where like it would pull it out of local storage properly, but it wasn't like the interaction on the page was kind of like clunky, like it was weird. Like I'd actually posted, I'd asked you a question and then on Twitter, and you said that it's like the APIs between the browser and the server side APIs and the browser side APIs don't really work that nicely together.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, because the issue was like, yeah.
Yeah, so in this case, because you're only rendering this on the client, you won't have that problem. So if you were trying to render this on the client and the server, that would be a problem. But if you're fine not server rendering it and just doing it as a client thing, then you can absolutely use local storage for those components. And it seems to me that that would be the preferred case. I mean, I have mixed feelings about this. Like maybe one day you decide, you know what, I can't server render all of this, but I could at least server render the tree view. Like you might be able to do that. And that's the thing that we're controlling. And so in that case, it would be better to put that either in a cookie. I guess how many of these are you doing? Like, do you think it would be too big for a cookie?
How many of what do you mean?
How many like item nodes could be
like
in that
potentially like thousands of.
Yeah. Okay. You wouldn't want that in a cookie. So if you wanted to do it server side, then you would need some sort of persistence layer. Might just do like a Redis thing, something a little simpler, or maybe even, I don't know, you probably wouldn't want in memory, but yeah, so if it just kind of depends on how flexible you want this to be for the future. So if you want to persist it on the server, then yeah, you're going to need to have that be a fetch request every time they click one of those things open, because you got to tell them, hey, this updated. If you're fine with it all just being a client side thing, then local storage is the way to go. Or like I've never tried IndexedDB, but even with thousands, you're probably okay just doing local storage. Like I think you get like 10 megabytes before they start raising a fuss about local storage. So, okay. So yeah, you're probably okay just using local storage. And there's that use local storage state hook that I would probably just use. Yeah, that's probably what I would do.
Okay. If you were storing it on the server, would you update it on every single click, or would you build some sort of like debounce function to do it?
I'd probably update it every click. Yeah, it's not like the most efficient thing ever, but like, I mean, every time you favorite a tweet on Twitter, like that's a network request, and you know, like doing like pretty regular network requests, I don't think is a big deal. The challenge with that is you've got IO going on there, and so there's like pending states and stuff. But if you take advantage of the optimistic UI and say, okay, they just made a submission that was a click, and also you might it may or may not make sense for those to be buttons. I think they're probably okay to make them buttons, but if you decide to, in fact, they probably should be buttons from an accessibility standpoint, but it may or may not make sense for those buttons to be form submit buttons. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I think it probably makes sense to make them form submit buttons. But anyway, if you didn't do form submit buttons, you could still do the imperative thing with the use fetcher and stuff. In fact, it definitely should be use fetcher. And it's just a choice between fetcher form or fetcher submit in like an on-click handler or something. But in either of those cases, you're going to have the fetcher.submission that will tell you that this particular button is being submitted. And so if it's being submitted, then you can have it in the toggled state. Just render it in the toggled state so that you have optimistic UI. And then if that request fails or something, then it just goes back naturally. You don't even have to worry about it. You might want to display some sort of error message that says, hey, sorry, I couldn't expand this for you, which would be kind of annoying. But I mean, expanding it, I think would have implications on everything else working anyway. So if that doesn't work, then nothing else is going to work anyway.
Okay. So would you recommend, because I originally had it that everything was like co-located inside that one component, like the state of the folder being opened, and it's recursive, obviously, right? But then I moved it out to a context. to a context. Would you recommend like getting rid of that context provider and just moving everything back into the component to manage the state there, and then when they click the button, it would just fire off that kind of use fetcher to the server to store.
So in that scenario, you're going to be getting the position or the open close position from the loader, and so that kind of acts as your single source of truth for whether these things are open and closed anyway. So you wouldn't need context for that, and so that like replaces context, which is nice. If you stick with doing client only, probably. The problem with putting it in context and having all of those components consume that is that all those components consume that. And so if you've got thousands of these and the user opens one of them, and that's got to change the state, and then on the side, it's going to persist that in local storage. So that piece is fine. It's going to happen after the render anyway. But the updates to the state, that's going to re-render all 1,000 or whatever of those, which is probably okay. It's probably not going to be a problem, but it's just something to consider. Whereas if you manage the state in individual components, it just re-renders the one component and all of its children. And so that will definitely be okay. And then as far as, yeah, it'd probably be okay. But like if you move it to the server render, now like that entire route is getting that loader state, or that, yeah, loader data. And so when the user clicks on one of those, it's going to go and persist all of that. It'll come back. Remix will say, oh, you made a mutation. Let me go get the data and bring that data back, and everything will re-render. And so like you might run into issues there and may have to memoize components and say, you know what, I actually don't care about this data change or something. I don't know. I think you'd probably be okay there too. So it really comes down to how important is it to server render that list. And if you think that it's important, then you're absolutely going to have to persist that and use fetcher on a per component basis. Even on a per component basis, use fetcher isn't going to prevent all of the items from re-rendering, because that's going to update the loader data, which will re-render.
Stop that from happening? Like, would you ever okay? Because like what I did was like I replaced use fetcher with just like a fetch call, because I'm like, well, now it doesn't reload my page, right? And but then
yeah.
That seems
so that's actually what I was gonna say. Like that's your escape hatch.
Okay.
And if you're like the problem with just using fetch regular fetch yourself is now you have to handle like error states and resubmissions and race conditions and all of that stuff. So this is one area where maybe Remix could do a little bit more for you. But like there absolutely is a way to say, hey, don't refetch stuff. It's an unstable API. It's like unstable _ should reload in the route. And then you can say, oh, they just toggled one of those things. I'm managing that separately in the component individually so that I don't need to reload. So yeah, you could absolutely, like, there is a workaround for that particular issue. And potentially in the future, Remix could have something a little bit like, I don't know, more surgical, where you could say, hey, this fetcher, here's the initial data for this fetcher. And now from here on out, I'm just, I'm going to update that state manually. And you're just going to be sending the submits, and don't worry about sending back any data. Maybe we'd do something like that for this type of use case. But I think that you've got a workaround there that will work. But again, that only matters if you want this to be server rendered. If you're fine with it just being client, then it's just local storage, and that's easy.
Okay.
So
Cool.
I think you'll be okay either way.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Kent. Appreciate it.
Yep. Sure thing. Okay. Abhishek had another question, an info related question. If, I'll share my screen so we're all looking at the same thing. If we're creating huge reports frequently, would that be a good system design and DB? Or what would be a good system design and DB choice to query? We have the details in MySQL. Do we need to use read replicas or sync to another better database, which is good for fetching and creating? Yeah, I am afraid that I have no idea. This is definitely not my realm of expertise. So I wouldn't know the first thing about that. Sorry. Okay, cool. Any last questions? We are well over time, but I'm happy to answer a couple last questions. And it always takes a second for people to unmute. So feel free to throw something in here. And if I can get to it today, then I will. I'll just wrap things up by saying, I believe next week's office hours are canceled. Yeah, that's May 6th. Because I'm going to be at Reactathon in California. And I'm doing a workshop on Friday, I think. So if you're going to be there, that'll be awesome. If you do want to see me in person somewhere awesome, then RemixConf is coming up next month. Oh my gosh, like less than a month away now. It's going to be so cool. And we sold out all of our sponsor slots, which is just sick. That is so cool. On a first conference for a framework that was open sourced in November, my friends. This thing is blowing up and it's awesome. Oh, and by the way, did you notice that speakers and sponsors change every time you refresh the page? Because like none of these is better than the other. They're all awesome. So that's a nice little touch. One of those things that you can do when you can put stuff in a loader. Yeah, man, Remix is so great. Sometimes when I'm working with Remix, like building something, I'm like, oh my gosh, they just nailed this so hard, like so good. Okay, last question. This should be live, but it has previous value and my test is failing. So select the program type and then we wait for live. Okay, so it depends on what version of user event you're using, because the most recent version, all of these are async. So you probably need to await this. And then you probably wouldn't need to do the wait for. Sorry. I'm not sure if you are on the latest version and adding await to this right here does not work, then I suggest making a minimal reproduction and posting it to the issues. And if nobody gets to you on that, then you can come back to my next office hours and we can dive into it together. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks, everybody. I hope that was helpful and interesting, and we can chat soon again in 2 weeks.